Please join me in welcoming to the innovation stage Professor Ulrich Weinberg, the director of the HPI School of Design Thinking. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Let's first have the people disappear. So for all the ones who are staying, I welcome you to the afternoon session here. The 20 minutes, I would like to talk about innovation, disruption, participation, and I would actually add another fourth word, which is collaboration. And what I want to talk about through the next 20 minutes is not about technology, it's not about business, it's not about the numbers, it's about the challenges we are facing right now in terms of mental challenges, the mental barriers, the caves, the cages we are in right now. And this is what we are trying to move towards at the School of Design Thinking since 9 years. And I just want to share some of the findings we had, and I called my introduction here of the design thinking the power of teams. Who of you is familiar with design thinking? Who of you did a workshop in design thinking? Who of you is using on a daily basis in his or her company or organization design thinking as a part of the DNA? Wow, this is great. Like 9 years ago, the term design thinking was not known at all. And about 5 years ago, I wouldn't have this kind of result. So I'm really happy to see that there is something, there is an impact. So what we started 9 years ago was focusing on students. The idea was to get students out of their silos, bring them together in a collaborative context, to be creative, to work on, to generate products, innovations for services, and so on. And we are just focusing on the students that in the neighborhood of Berlin. We are located in Potsdam, and we were not thinking of having students from whole Germany, from whole Europe, from all over the world. But right now, if you look at the numbers, we have about 120 students representing about 60 to 70 different backgrounds, about 50 different universities, about 20 different nations, and we have a teaching team accompanying them, not really doing this kind of traditional lecture thing, what I'm doing right now, but actually being coaches to the teams, to the little teams of about 35 to 40 people. So what we didn't expect, that the impact we had with that school, with students, was affecting the industry as well, and even more. So since we started with very basic, fundamental, new things in education, no grades, no credit points, no individual certification, and no curriculum. We started with this kind of thing, which is a kind of portfolio. We started with actually real problems we were getting from companies, from organizations, and giving them to the students. And this was the infectious phase for the companies as well. So the companies were approaching us, they were giving their problems to the students. The students had 15 weeks of time to solve their problems, to come up with prototypes, and the companies were realizing the students are putting themselves in a mode which is very, very efficient. It's a new thing. And they were seeing something which they liked. They didn't only like the outcome, the prototype, the great idea. No, they liked to see that there's something going on what they want to participate in as well, and they want to use as well. And this is why you are using lots of you are using now design thinking. So we got approached by large companies, by small and medium-sized companies, by governmental organizations, by administrations, by all kinds of institutions, by NGOs. And this is just one of the portfolios. We have tons of different. And just an overview about the companies approaching us. And why are they approaching us? They are approaching us because they are feeling the incredible growing complexity, the exponential complexity. And this is my personal curve about 20 or 30 years ago when I started moving from analog media. I used to be a specialist in computer graphics, computer animation, but at that time, 30 years ago, there was just analog media, so I had to move into that. And at that time, like 30 or 25 years ago, that was my personal curve. It was kind of linear. There was something raising, there was something growing, but now my personal curve looks more like this, like an exponential thing. And this is probably what you are feeling also, looking at your pieces of glass every day. Who of you does not carry around this kind of piece of glass? Is there anybody not having this kind of piece of glass? No? Oh, too bad. Because 9 years ago, when we started the D school, that was not existing. This kind of machinery is now driving the exponential change. This is a part of that. So, and I have a hard time to predict what is in 5 years from now, because the interdependencies of everything what we start to do, every new product, every new service idea, every new system we think of, the interdependencies with others is growing. So we just have to be aware of that. And a lot of people, I deal a lot with large organizations, with large companies, and they sometimes shy away and they say, wow, it's the complexity we can't handle. But there's no way. And we're trying to do very simple things to enable people to actually handle that, to move forward, to do things what startups are doing intuitively already. And most of you are representing, a lot of you are representing startups. So part of what you're doing, we're trying actually to bring to the students. But there are a lot of obstacles. So I have 2 slides to illustrate that. The first slide is the answer to the question, what is the most inspirational source if we want to come up with complex solutions for complex problems, or with great and innovative and disruptive solutions? Is it technology? We're saying, yes, it might be. Is it looking at new business models? Looking at Silicon Valley, looking at South Korea, looking at Japan, what they're doing? Yes, it might be. What we are saying, the most inspirational source is actually looking at the change of human needs and human values. And looking and asking always the question, why? Why are we doing things? And I remember very well the times when that thing was not on the market yet. And one of the professors of Stanford, our sister institution, they were doing design thinking about 2 years longer than we do, so about 11 years. So one of the professors was coming 9 years ago with his iPhone, and we were sitting around him like around a campfire, and at that time we couldn't believe it. Wow, just a piece of glass, and amazing. At that time, I didn't have any idea that I would ever have the wish for an app, because that term didn't exist at that time. But now we're seeing constantly this kind of things popping up again and again. And this is just a technology thing. So we try to be very, very close to the people, not only to the customers, but also to the guys who are producing things. And we're trying to start there first and then look for technology which is fitting to the needs, and we're trying to find out, is there an interesting business model behind it? And the even more important slide is that one, to illustrate how we frame design thinking. This is kind of the nice version of the little drawing I did when I returned from Stanford 9 years ago, trying to find out what those guys are doing at the D School, at IDEO. And I nailed it down to the 3 core things, which is first, we go away from the focus on the individual creative power. We focus on the creative power of teams, of little diverse teams. We embrace diversity in any kind, not just disciplinary diversity, gender diversity, cultural diversity. Get disabled people also as a part of the diversity in the teams. And when I'm talking about teams, I'm not talking about a team of 2, it's too small. Not team of 10, it's too large. Team of 4, 5, 6, little kind of family-sized team. The second thing is we move away from linear ways to do things, and all startups never start in a linear mode. All of you who are running startups, you are constantly improving, you're constantly doing things like this, but most of the big organizations are stuck in traditional waterfall models They define what the outcome should be of a project in 5 years from now. They define the milestones in between, and then they do step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then they think they're done. We are thinking those times are over. The exponential acceleration we are in is asking and calling for an iterative, looping thing and approach. Iterative way, which means we have to do a lot of observation, we have to do a lot of prototypes, we have to do a lot of tests, a lot of failures, and as fast as possible to build this, to run through that process. And this is just, we are kind of using the process of designers and architects. Who of you is a designer? Architects? No? Software architects? Some of you? So all of you who are doing this is kind of the intuitive version of what you're doing every day. But most of the people are not aware of that. Most of the people are used to linear ways of doing things. So we try to get our students out of that mode in a team. And the third thing is, we figured out if you focus on teams, if you're using an iterative process, which is activating the full mental power, the left part of the brain, and the same amount the right part of the brain, you need also a new space. You need a new physical environment. Look at what that physical environment of Code N here, of that festival, is changing, it's doing to you. I think it's very, very important to notice that, to go to that place, and they were taking very much care of how to set up the architecture, how to set up the whole booth, all the booths. And the same thing we are doing that, we are focusing fully on supporting student teams and not individuals. And if you look at traditional architecture in universities, in schools, and also in the work environment, it's usually focused very much on individual performance. The single desk next to another single desk, next to another single desk. And even if they are connected through phone lines, people are kind of in a competitive mode. So we try to get them out of that. And this I call the dynamic triangle of design thinking. And if you take that serious, it's very, very simple actually, to be mindful of the place, the process, and the people. But if you do that seriously, as we do in Potsdam, and our friends at Stanford are doing that, you fundamentally change the culture of learning. Because we are breaking with every rule, every fundamental rule of the education system. And if you do the same thing in companies, and this is what we are encouraging about 2,500 professionals every year, besides our 240 students, we are running thousands of managers through this kind of programs. We do the same thing. We put them in a new space where their habit changes. We ask them to do iterative loops, to not work linear anymore, and we ask them to work in teams, to focus on collaboration. And then what happens? Magic happens. You change the culture of working, fundamentally. And this is why a lot of companies are approaching us. And some of the things which happened, which actually surprised us, one of the things was we were generating startup after startup. We didn't intend that. But since we were starting with teams, we're focusing on teams, the teams after one semester and the second semester, they stayed. They stick together, they started a company, they focused on a new thing, they maybe continued one of the projects they started in one of the semesters, and we have more than 80 spin-offs and startups just falling out of that process. Same thing happens in companies. As soon as you put people in a design thinking mode, in that kind of open, collaborative mode, they start to be entrepreneurs. This might be scary to large companies, but it is not actually, because you are nurturing entrepreneurship, which is very, very helpful also within a company. And the other thing, what happened, what surprised us, was that companies were looking at that spacey thing, and they were saying, we need the same environments at our place. And I call that the protected space to fail. Those are spaces which need highly protection through the upper management. And it is a kind of area where every crazy idea should be allowed, even within the company. No incentives, no punishment, no idea is forbidden. So this kind of environments, this is just an excerpt, there are a lot more. And after, I hope, you approach me later and give me more pictures of your spaces, because I would like to add that on that picture here. We like to see that a lot of companies are doing that. You see the Accenture design thinking space here, also inspired. Actually, they started using our furniture because we had to invent, 9 years ago, we had to invent tables and design tables for teamwork. They were not existing. You could find coffee tables for drinking coffee and eating collaboratively, but not for working, so we had to build them. And this is what made us to set up a professional program with 3-day courses, with individually focused and professional training program for implementing design thinking in a longer term in companies. We even started a certification program, which we hate that name, but we were asked. We're in Germany, In Germany, a lot of people are asking for this kind of certificate, so we started a program to define a certain quality of HPI. And this is amazing. This is now the biggest part of our program. The students program is a small thing. This program is 10 times bigger. And I'm moving back now to that slide here, because at the beginning when we started 9 years ago, I thought, looking at companies, looking at the school system, looking at the university, all 3 of those things are difficult to introduce. It turned out now for me, looking at more than 1,000 alumni and looking on maybe 10,000 representatives of companies, and we are moving in and zooming in nearly every discipline, in nearly every different part of the economy. The biggest obstacle, the biggest hurdle was not the space and not the process, it was actually the teaming, the collaboration aspect. And you might think, why? Because we are all networked, we are all collaborating somehow. But actually, the truth is, if you look at, this is a cheap picture of the internet to represent the connected world, the networked world we're living in. It should be 3-dimensional, it should be moving, and it should be growing, and so on. But just leave it for that as a 2D version. The thinking in the back of our mind, and how we produce structures, how we organize knowledge, is more like this. I call that Brockhaus thinking. And I'm using that German term because I'm using it since 2013. Because 2013, Bertelsmann, the publisher of Brockhaus, the most famous German encyclopedia, up and running and in every household for about 200 years, stopped the printing. They just stopped printing the Brockhaus because they were figuring out people are not using that thing anymore for discovering new things. They were using the networked version like Wikipedia or Google. And they were running out of business. No one was buying those books anymore. And I kept standing in front of my Brockhaus at home, looking at the level of dust on top. And then I realized something which reminded me to, when I meet first time with company representatives, I usually ask them, draw me a picture of your company, of your organization. And usually what they do is a thing like this. Do this drawing and say, well, we have 8 departments, and there's a management level on top, so management level 1 and level 2, and we have the board up there. And I kept sitting there and said, ooh, that looks very similar to the Brockhaus in my home, And I started using that as a metaphor, a visual metaphor for things which are disappearing right now. So we are in that phase to move from a kind of linear, disconnected, analog way of thinking and doing to a networked, collaborative, digital way of doing and thinking. But the problem is we are not very far. We are prepared in our minds that I would position myself up there. I did first steps, and if you look at the arrow could be design thinking, but there are a lot of different ways how to move from the upper to the lower way. But this is a mode which we need to train, and we train our students, and our students are not very much further. They're a little bit down. They come into our school and they think we're completely connected. We're on Facebook, on our WhatsApp, and we are all the time. We are completely connected. The truth is, their machines are connected. Their minds are completely competitive, highly competitive. Why? They're trained that way. Our school system, our university system makes them to be individual competitors, very strong. And we still make them think that it's a good thing to become a hero in M, or another hero in F, or in P, and to really jump up the hierarchy thing. This is what we train our kids in school. And it takes a while for our students. It takes about 2-3 weeks until they realize, oh, they don't grade. They don't measure me individually. So I don't have to behave like this all the time. And then they change their behavior and they start doing something different. And this is very interesting because you switch me up? No. and because they relieving new energies. The thing that happened is they all of a sudden allow themselves to do much more things, to do much more crazy things they would never do in this kind of individual competitive mode. So I just want to introduce at the end another term, because I wrote a book about the network thinking approach, the new approach. And a friend of mine was looking at that, and he was introducing a new term. And he was saying, Uli, what you're describing there up there is the IQ mode. We measure the intelligence of a single person, and there's one number, 84, 92, 112. But the thing you're describing down there, the network, is calling for a WeQ mode. And I didn't hear about that. And I asked him, it was Peter Spiegel, I asked him, how did you come up with that? How did you read about that? He said, I just made it up. And I'm saying, Peter, this is incredible. This is one of the terms we need. We need new words. We need new pictures to describe the paradigm shift we are in right now. And I'm using that constantly. I started using that about 2 years ago. We actually started the WeQ Foundation to support activities which are moving people from that mindset, from the old mindset to the new mindset, because our education institutions are not doing that right now. So we have to support that, and I would encourage you and invite you to accompany me and us on that trip, and I would hope that the Code N here helps to nurture the WeQ mentality and the collaboration activities between all of us. You have to do it, we have to do it together. Thank you very much.